infiltrated, the faster there is an attack on the group, and they are eliminated either by corruption, and if that doesn't work, we find churches like the first movement that Katz mentions just disappearing altogether. Who knows why? Defamation. You have demonizing of the Sabbatarian movements. You find this on the continent in the 1500s very strongly in the different Anabaptist movements that are demonized. Everyone, Protestants and Catholics, both cooperate in the destruction of the different movements. I can think of three right offhand. The Jan de Leyden movement, the Messianic experiment, which lasted 3 years and was overrun. The same thing happened in Strasbourg in the Peasant Revolt. And of course you have, even at the time of Luther, the opposition to von Karlstadt, who was Sabbatarian, and also the final typical characteristic of baptism of immersion of adults. This thing, both the Sabbath and baptism were very clearly pointed out to Luther, and he failed to accept them, and rather influenced the princes in Germany to destroy the Sabbatarian movement in Silesia. So you find this attitude going back, this strong attitude of persecution, and the Sabbatarians fleeing to the mountains. You find them in Poland, in the mountains, Bosnia, in the mountains, Transylvania, in the mountains, and Taurus, Caucasus, and even in America, in the Appalachians. All of these movements having to hide, being isolated, being small, few means of communication, but always continually faithful, despite the process of elimination and infiltration. That seems to be the typical attitude of others to them. I've been talking a lot about my own family, but in conclusion, I think we should turn our eyes to something that has been very much neglected. We tend to think of the churches in Western Europe. Even in my family, there's a strand going back to the Oriental Sabbatarians. When you think of the Sabbath keepers in Turkey, among the dervishes, the Bektashis specifically, there were millions of Sabbatarian, Unitarian believers. When Kemal Atatürk took over Turkey, the Ottoman Empire fell in the end of the first quarter of this century. Turkey became a republic. One of the first things he did was to make the dervish orders illegal, especially the Bektashis. He left other orders, but the Bektashis were eliminated. Millions of them disappeared, who knows where or how. Among the Bektashis, certainly not all of the Bektashis, and probably not a majority of them, were Sabbath keepers. Millions and millions of Bektashis disappeared. So many disappeared that the Sabbatarian minority had to count for millions. And this happened in this century without a squeak. Not one word of protest, insofar as I know. and the Bektashi order of dervishes is still illegal in Turkey today. I've traveled extensively in Turkey looking for such people. I found pockets of them, especially in mountain areas. People who come together on Sabbath to read the scriptures, who believe in the Bible. They read the Quran as well, but their liturgy is focused on, their worship service is focused on the Psalms. They read the Psalms for their worship. They base their beliefs primarily on the Bible. They give biblical foundation for what they believe before referring to the Quran. I found many such people, talked to them. When I was working for the Missionary Society, my area included all of Scandinavia and the former Soviet Union. I was in the Soviet Union, working in the Soviet Union for 4 years. And I found many, many different kinds of groups of Sabbatarians hiding out. Not only the Adventist groups, and there are a number of those, the ordinary Adventists, the more or less collaboration Adventists. Then there were the underground Adventist church, the Reformed Adventist, and the underground Reformed. At least 4 different Adventist groups were there. But beyond that, throughout the White Russian area, the Ukraine, there were many, many groups of Sabbath keepers with Unitarian teaching, as you find from Transylvania, Hungary, and still spreading out through eastward, hundreds of groups of people. In Russian, the Sabbath keepers are called subotniki. I have met 3 different kinds of subotniki. One is Orthodox and Trinitarian, and they follow the rites of the Russian Orthodox Church. They had, all during the Soviet period, their own village, their own church, and they turned the village into, I don't know if, I think it was a kolkhoz, unless it was a sovkhoz, a communal farm, in which throughout the 70 years of Soviet domination, they kept the Sabbath as a collective farm. I found radical Unitarians who were actually, I would say, Karaim, converts to Judaism who do not believe in the Talmud, non-rabbinical Jews or Jewish converts. But in between them, we find the moderate Unitarians, and they have been there for centuries. I met a man in Leningrad, and he had no socks. His feet were wrapped. He had come from Siberia. He told me he knew of many, many communities of people in Siberia who had been collecting there as back from the times of Catherine the Great in the Russian Empire, deported to Siberia for their faith and establishing Sabbatarian Unitarian communities all through Siberia. And he wore very coarse clothing, carved, not buttons, but sort of hooks, handmade shoes, and he had somehow gotten to Leningrad, and I met him there, and he told me something of the Sabbatarian people of which he was a part. So the movement of the true faith is spreading all around the world and going back for centuries and centuries.